Hey guys, Enigmatic Mr. L here, and welcome to a video where I talk about who my most hated Fire Emblem character is in each of the main series games. So going into this, first and foremost, they must be playable characters. Otherwise, it would mostly just be annoying bosses, minor antagonists, or maybe a few major antagonists. I will be factoring in all sorts of factors. There's gameplay, their stats, how good they are, or how bad they are. Growth rates, base stats, abilities, weapon ranks, that sort of thing. Their character, just their personality, their supports, that recruitment, if they have a really tedious recruitment or really annoying recruitment, that sort of thing. And basically anything else is fair game. Bear in mind, of course, as with all things, like your mileage may vary. Like I might have some characters on the list and say they're bad, they're lousy, I don't like them. And say, yeah, but they're more kind of like a funny, haha bad, like they're fun to train. And that might be true for you. And there might be some characters I don't mention who I think they're funny, like they're bad, but like in a funny sort of way. And you might think that they're just bad, period. That's fine. Only one entry per main series. I'm discounting the first three main series Fire Emblem games. Those are the only three I've played once each. Everything else I played at least twice. And they're kind of janky and clunky. Otherwise, probably be some few repeats on here. And as always, it's kind of alluded to earlier, this is just my personal opinion. So if you like any of these characters on here, great. That's more power to you. With that out of the way, let's just get on with the list. Starting with FE4, Genealogy of the Holy War. Now, I actually considered putting Finn here, just because Finn, he doesn't have the best start. The first two chapters, he fights against units where he has a weapon triangle disadvantage, and he doesn't end strong either. He's the only characters in Gen 1 and Gen 2. And in Gen 2, most of your child characters, if you have like auto pairings, they end up surpassing him. So starting bad, ending bad, doesn't make a good father for inheritance because he loses his weapons at the start of Chapter 7. But I like his personality. He rises to be fairly strong, like chapters 2 and 3 of Gen 1, and is good like crutch character for like the start of Gen 2 if you put some investment into him. Plus, he's just good in Thracia 776. Different game, but still. In the end, I went with Hannibal, one of the last characters you get in the game. Hannibal, first and foremost, he just has really annoying recruitment. You have to sneak past him, make sure you don't kill him, recruit his adoptive son, then drag that adoptive son with really poor movement back up to talk to him. So that's a pain. And then when you get him, he's just not that great. You make sure he's a promoted general. He has Pavice, but that's not nearly as good as on a player unit as it is on an. It's annoying when the enemy has it in a player. There's not much you can do with it. It's not reliable. And just beyond that, his stats, he can't really do much of anything. It's a game dominated by movement, and you got this guy like a general, poor movement. I think, he makes this good castle guard, but then because of his fairly low speed, he still gets doubled by Wyvern riders coming in to seize castles shortly after you recruit him in that chapter. He doesn't have good resistance, and the next two chapters filled with magic. And even just things like clearing the arena, you think that doesn't make a unit good, but it can be fun. I just find his lack of pursuit, lack of good speed, I have trouble getting him to clear the arena consistently. So overall, just not a big fan of Hannibal. I played Genealogy of the Holy War 3 times now, and when you fight Julius and Ishtar early on, chapter 10, I've cleared it by just beeline straight past them, go past them and dance, kill the boss in season 1 turn. I've killed Julius, I've killed Ishtar. If I ever play it a 4th time, if they kill one of your units, they go away, I'll probably just sacrifice Hannibal, just so I can have a little mix-up of things. Now, Arden is also an armor knight, generally slow, has a lot of Hannibal's problems, and he's not even promoted, but he has good availability. He's around from beginning to end, not late joining. He's more kind of a funny, haha bad, and he does get the pursuit ring, which you immediately pawn off of him and give it to someone else, but any character that gets the pursuit ring, I'm going to have a hard time disliking. Next, we got Thracia 776. Now, you might think because of the previous entry with difficult to recruit generals, I put Xavier here, but Xavier's just takes it a step further. It's so annoying that's memorable in its own right. And it's more of kind of thing you love to hate sort of thing. So for Thracia 776, I went with a fairly minor character. just in Robert. He joins as part of the Scrub Squad in like Chapter 9, along with like Kane and Alba, I think his name, and like Selfina. None of them that great. Selfina's kind of okay, but basically just Robert's problem is he's outclassed by like anything. Like you want to use a solid mounted unit. Was it Carrion joins just a few chapters earlier, has a few niche things over him. That regard, Finn's good. Fargus is good. You want to use a solid bow user, Rodin, or maybe even like Tanya's better. Or of course, joining the same chapter, Selfina's better. Or if you just want to meme around and use like a terrible unit, like Marty's way more fun to use in my opinion. One of my favorite characters in the series, honestly. Or if you go B route, like Miranda's kind of like funny bad. And yeah, he joins with like Kane and Alba, who are also bad, but at the very least they're like Christmas Cavaliers. That's like memorable in its own right. Like I'm thinking if I can go through the patience of training someone next time I play Thracia 776, I actually might train those two. But Robert is just, you want a bow user, outclassed. You want like a strong cavalry units, outclassed. You want to just meme around, just outclassed. Doesn't really have anything particularly going for him. Honestly, you could say just more forgettable than anything, but I had to pick someone for this list. Binding Blade is the easiest one yet. It's Roy. Yes, there are definitely characters who are worse than Roy. Like from the very first chapter, chapter 1, Walt and Bors, who join like right alongside Roy, they're worse. But you just use them for a little bit, they'll be terrible, and then you bench them most likely, or you use them just to like meme around with. Roy, you're stuck with him for the whole game. And he starts out, he's not so bad. A lot of the enemies are axe users. He's got weapon triangle. His rapier can be, kind of niche. But after you get past like the Western Isles, all of your units like start promoting, getting more movement, that sort of thing. Roy just ends up falling behind in more ways than one. You literally have to like drag him, rescue him if you want to clear chapters like efficiently. And then he's just like more of a liability than anything. He's literally providing stat penalties and speed and skill. And because he doesn't promote so late, like especially your first playthrough, so you're playing on normal mode, you're doing like the guidance chapters, you'll likely end up with like a capped Roy at level 20, and you just can't really do anything with him until he promotes, and there's only like 3 chapters left. And yeah, character not being able to gain levels doesn't inherently make them bad, but it is something that just feels bad, not being able to gain experience. And it'd be one thing if it was someone like, a capped Sigurd, a Genealogy of the Holy War, and he just like kicks butt all over. But Roy, he doesn't do that. Even when he promotes, I think the biggest kick to the teeth is at the Binding Blade. Unlike the Ragnall, say, in Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, it does not have infinite durability. So you're just limited to 20 uses. And what I like to do is use the hammer and staff on it, so I can actually let Roy go ham a little more. But even still, last few chapters, we're still 6 movement, finally promoted Roy. Decent weapon. It's not enough to make up for the whole like middle game where he basically just did nothing, was an active liability. So that's why he earns this spot. For Blazing Blade, after putting a little bit of thought into it, I decided to go with Wallace. The main reason being your first playthrough, assuming you're playing like on a fresh save, you have to go through Lynn normal mode, and Wallace forcibly takes the Nightcrest you get, and you have to use it on him. Even though Sane and Kent would be much better candidates for it, nope, it's first time playing that you have to promote him. And yeah, stats are good at that time. In low movement, it's whatever. Like, it's Lynn normal mode, like Ellie would normal mode, so it's easy enough. But use him for that chapter, like the next chapter, and then just kind of buggers off completely. Like, most likely, most players are first time playing, they're going to be using the main lords, Lynn, Hector, and Ellie would. So you're going to go like this route split. You're going to go the map where you actually don't get Wallace. You get Geets instead. So you'll just never see him again. He's like, well, thanks for the Nightcrest. And then you just never see him again. That's all you remember him for. And even if you do recruit him, like you go in this like Fog of War chapter, and the easiest, like quickest, most reliable clear on that is like a 2-turn clear where you don't even get Wallace. So if you want to give, and generally speaking, like Fog of War chapters, many other players don't like them. So if you want to clear that chapter reliably, you don't even like pick Wallace back up. And even if you go to the trouble of picking back up, so well, stats were good, at the end of Lynn mode. Now they feel worse than Oswin's. They're probably not, but that's what they feel like. Like, Oswin is like the one armor knight I actually like. Like, yeah, he still has poor movement, but He can actually do his job of tanking well, do this high defense and middling speed, good strength. He's probably my favorite armor knight in the series. Now, flaws have been that he's joined relatively quickly, wouldn't take the spot, but for taking a Knight Crest and then most likely never being seen again, or if you do see him again, he's just completely fallen off by the time he rejoins. That's why he earns this spot as my most disliked character in Blazing Blade. Sacred Stones was a really tricky one to decide. I almost just said not actable. This is the one game it's like, I don't really dislike any unit because some units are really good, like Seth, and, training projects like Brands and Vanessa. They're good. Even characters that are generally outclassed, they have some niche utility, like Cyrene joins late, but she can help with ferrying people across mountains in like chapter 20 or so, or that chapter with like the Gorgon eggs, she can reach them quickly. Characters, that might have somewhat of a lacking personality or someone's a bit annoying, like Lute, who's a bit smug in her supports and stuff. Well, high magic, high speed, I can't put a character like that, my most disliked. In the end, I thought of one who just barely makes this list, mostly on a technicality, but I just decided to go with Renak. The whole reason being is for his recruitment in an Ephraim route. An Erica route's fine. You just open the door and most likely talk to him with Erica. Well, most likely talk to him about Sheriff for free, or you can talk to him with Erica. I think it's like 9,800 gold. And if you do go to the trouble of recruiting him, he's not great, but he's worth it. He can help with chests in his joining chapter. Next chapter, next chapter is like the desert chapter with hidden items. Having a 100% guaranteed rate to find them is good. That ends up helping a lot. So, he's fine. Then at Ephraim route, he's just like a huge pain to recruit because he starts like taking off immediately. Like the first time I played Thracia 776, I went through the trouble of recruiting Xavier. The first time I played Sacred Stones in Ephraim route, I saw what a risk it would be to try to recruit Renak, and I was like, I don't need him. So just for that reason, he makes this list. All right, next we have Path of Radiance, another very easy one. I went with Shinon. From a gameplay perspective, he's like fine in the early game. Provoke is like a nice skill to take the heat off your more squishy units at this time. It's kind of a shame he can't counterattack because he's like a sniper, but it's also kind of funny. Not solid enough stats. By the time he rejoins, it's just like completely outclassed by like everyone. It's often not even worth it. But that's not the main reason here. The main reason is just because he's a jerk, an a-hole, really. And yeah, you can have a character who's a likable jerk. And I imagine there's some people who might say that Shinon is one, like the fun kind of jerk. But in my opinion, he just misses the mark by a lot. Like, my favorite character in the Looney Tunes series is Daffy Duck. Like, Chuck Jones once said, Bugs Bunny is who we want to be. Daffy Duck is who we are. Like, that's how you make a likable, sort of like fun jerk character. Shinon is just, not that we love to hate him, just me, just hate him. The second time I played Path of Radiance, I got up to the chapter where you re-recruit Shinon, and I could spare a deployment spot for Rolf. I could have said, I could just deploy him, talk to Shin and get on, but I was like, I don't even like Shinon. I'm just going to let him die. And he was the only character that died in that playthrough. First playthrough, I went through the trouble of recruiting everyone, keep him alive. Second playthrough, I almost did that, but I was like, who cares about Shinon, honestly. We got Radiant Dawn. I could have gone with Shinon again, but that felt like a bit of a boring choice, just repeating. Plus, in this game, you get to see like a bit more charming aspects of like his supports with like Rolf. Not really supports, but like some of the like base conversations, that sort of thing. And he's a decent enough unit. Like, sure, he's locked to like a bow, so that kind of limits like how good he can be long term, but he has very solid stats, so that's something. So, in the end, I went with Aaron. So, basically, everyone knows like the Dawn Brigades are terrible members, and like their maps are so like annoying to play because you have very few, if any, good units. But looking at it, some of the units like Jill or Nolan, Psyhawk, maybe even like Edward, if he gets lucky in his first few level ups, they can be decent long-term projects. Other ones like Meg is just more like funny bad. Like, she's so bad it's like funny. I think it's funny, like in this, I could be outdated this time, but I think in this speed run of Radiant Dawn, speedrunners still go to the trouble recruiting Meg just for like pushing or shoving shenanigans. And then you got Fiona, who's just like a regular cavalier with like terrible stats, never mentioned again despite having some relative story importance, and like all the maps afterwards are like terrible for like cavalry units. Aaron's just kind of bad, but he's not like funny bad. Like you look at his stats, his speed is like so slow, he gets doubled by everything, which is never like a good unit feel. And just like the cherry on cake, well, also there's just the fact like Edward, Nolan, Leonardo, and like the English version of Radiant Dawn, they get their own special like personal weapon, but Aaron gets like nothing. You think he might get his own lance, but nope. He just like after his like recruitment chapter, he's never like mentioned again in like base conversations or anything. Now, granted, that's kind of a problem like Radiant Dawn in general, but still. And like the cherry on top is just the fact that he has this like grayed out like model. He falls into like the problem like you think you moved all your units, and then you realize, oh, why does I have one unit left? And it's like, oh, it's Aaron. It looks like he's been moved, but he hasn't. Other characters have this too, but for Aaron, that's really just kind of the cherry on top. Then we get to Shadow Dragon. Really, in my opinion, most of the cast here is just more forgettable than anything. But if I had to pick one character, it would be Frey. And he's like a decent enough unit, but that's kind of the problem. Just it's not so much Frey himself, but just more like Shadow Dragon's problem. The first time you play the game, we're most likely going to do normal mode. That's what I did. I think I didn't sacrifice Frey, but it's been a few years now. But then most subsequent playthroughs, you're probably going to play hard 1 or like a higher difficulty. And then you don't get to use Frey at all. Even though you would have loved to like play through the prologue at like a higher difficulty, choose someone else to sacrifice, maybe like Gordon or someone. No, you just use him the first time in normal mode, hope you didn't like go with the canon choice of him being the sacrifice, and you never get to see him again. And yeah, I did mention in my most forgettable Fire Emblem characters, like Nord, most players aren't going to see her like at all. But the fact that she's not even the prologue, most likely, because most players probably aren't going to end up like killing like two more units in like a normal mode prologue. That just makes her more forgettable and everything. Frey is just kind of frustrating seeing a good unit and then just like never being able to use him on anything more than like your first playthrough, if that. Then we got New Mystery of the Emblem here. I tried to avoid just cold takes, like most of the entries so far. They might not necessarily be hot takes, but it's so. This is probably the coldest take on the list. I went with Chris. Now, I don't hate Chris. I don't really hate the playable Avatar characters in general, but that doesn't mean I love them either. Chris's main problem, well, to start out with, he's completely inserted into like a game he originally had nothing to do with, kind of like textbook level Mary Sue or Gary Stew or Marthy Stew, whatever you want to call it. But I think the main problem with Chris is just the fact of like in all of his supports or all of his dialogue, everyone just talks him up like, wow, you're so great. Wow, you're so amazing. And well, I don't hate it. I don't really like it either. Like, I think intelligence systems kind of learned the lesson. Like, look at Viola supports and say, like, Three Houses, more about exploring the quirks of the character he's talking to. And just with Chris, I think he would have looked a lot better if he's a background type. Like, yeah, have a playable soldier. Maybe have, like, the prologue, future chapters, and some, like, guidance chapters dedicated to the story. But for the main story, like, have him just be, like, a soldier in Marth's army. And just have him, like, not appear in the main story at all. Just be, like, Marth and Jagan, how it was in the original. Yeah, I don't want to copy, like, the sentiments of, like, quote-unquote Fire Emblem elitists too much. You probably heard this all, like, plenty of times before, but if I had to pick one character for New Mystery Emblem, it would have to be Chris. Although I will say he is at least a very good unit, like, purely in terms of, like, gameplay, if you're, like, skipping the story and, like, supports and everything. He's a fantastic unit, probably the very best. So at least he has that going for him. Then we have Awakening. This was my first Fire Emblem game, so it has a special place in my heart. I think a lot of the characters, minus like a few of the ones who are like quote unquote Robin sexual, like you just look at their supports, a lot of them have at least have like a few really like funny or like charming supports. But I had to pick one character here. I did consider Noe just because of her design, mostly just the way she's dressed is like, oh, I'm really like I look like a small child, but it's okay because I'm really a 1,000-something-year-old dragon. But the outfits I don't like, but it wasn't enough to get her like on this list. As a unit, she's fine, and I think her supports, if you go up to A or so, it's fine. If you're going to have to go to S to get like child characters, just marry her to like Rickon or Donald, someone who looks young. There's that. I could consider Muriel here, who I just find like overall boring. But in the end, I went with Vake, just because I just found him annoying. I don't remember like a single charming like or funny like support conversation he has. I could be remembering wrong. It's been a few years. If anyone knows any like good Vake support conversations, please let me know in the comments. Just on a unit, like I'm not talking about lunatic difficulty where I think there's been like a shift in the meta, like and how like good Vake is, but lunatic and lunatic plus is just kind of bullcrap. It's not fun. Then normal and hard, Vake can be good, but like anyone can be good. I think the most like funny thing about Vake is if you have Muriel trade him his axe and he immediately attacks and like dies on the counterattack, he'll still have the conversation with Muriel afterwards. That's funny. My last playthrough of Fire Emblem, that's what I did with Vake, just intentionally killed him off. And then I tried to keep almost everyone else alive. But yeah, just, it refers to himself in the third person, which I think it works for Gregor. He's more like the big, like, friendly Russian guy. Vake just kind of seems weird. Just wasn't a fan of his character. Not really a big fan of his character design. Just not a fan in general. Next, we have Fates, where I did consider having Keaton on this list. He's a decent enough unit, but like his supports just all feel very samey. It's like, hey, you want to see my treasure collection? And our character's like, oh, is it gold, jewels? And it's like, hey, a chewed up rat or something. But I think they work on an individual level. They just kind of repeat themselves a lot, which I guess is true for a lot of characters in Fates. Like Setsune, just all of her support conversations, hey, I found a pitfall. And that's about it. The character I went with in the end was Azama. Yeah, part of it, a small part of it was like his supports. Like he's got that sharp wit, and it's kind of funny like on other characters. And then when he starts like insulting you, the player, like the Korin like support, it's like, okay, just because I didn't want the players to kiss my butt doesn't mean I want them to like be a butt in like the supports. But the main reason Azama is on here is because of how he is as a unit. Like in Birthright, he's fine. Like, he's actually got a pretty good strength growth, despite being, like, in a magic class. So what I did, I think, one of my playthroughs, I just reclassed him into a Dread Fighter. He's fine. Not like but Birthright also has, like, Ryoma. So, there's that. Anyone can be strong. It's like, Modern Fire Emblem, there are no bad units. Just some are better than others. Revelation, he joins, like, so late that outside of, like, a grinding context, you're probably not going to get much use out of him. But the big kicker is him as like an enemy unit in Conquest. Like the first time you fight him, because it was like personal skill, you take, I think it's like half the damage dealt if you're adjacent to him if he's unarmed, which you're not checking skills. Whoops. That can be annoying to deal with. And then when you find him later again, like Hinoka's mech, he's got that like long range staff that like permanently reduces your max HP. I think that's the thing about Izama. Like, I know I was only factoring playable units, but I am factoring in his role in like Conquest as well. As an enemy, he's very annoying to deal with, but as a playable unit, those strategies don't work as well. Just the difference of like trying to keep everyone alive. Like generally, it's not worth hexing in. We only have limited hexes. It's not worth keeping him unarmed. It's better if he's unarmed, you probably don't want to see him combat like at all. So just being an annoying enemy to face when those same strategies don't work as well, in my opinion, like when you have him as a playable unit, that earns him his spot here, my most disliked Fates character. Next, we have Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. So I did consider putting Faye on here, mainly just because she's a satellite and love interest for Alm, but she is at least a good unit. Like, you make her into a Pegasus Knight, you don't feel like, using Claire, she's fine. But making her into a cleric with like having another cleric is really good. So that kind of saved her from getting on this list. Then I did consider having Conrad on here. Kind of annoying, just how it makes Celica have less agency than she did in the original. But tried to avoid too many like cold takes on here. That seemed a little like boring and predictable. So in the end, I went with Python. I believe in my first playthrough of Shadows of Valentia, I think you talk to him. He doesn't ask to like join your army, so you go into the dungeon, you come out, and I just assume, okay, we'll see him again. I just left. I didn't recruit him until like after the game. I saw his recruitable character, went back to that cave and recruited him. So completely missed him my first playthrough. Then just as a unit, yes, I think he has like really terrible accuracy. You're better off just making one of your villagers an archer because there's only so many like killer bow. There's only so much gold to make a killer bow, like that sort of thing. There are diminishing returns on multiple archers. Like all the other characters who join early get closer to promotion. Like Gray has really good attack, so if you don't care about doubling just because you're going to do Hunter's Volley, Gray makes a fine enough archer. Cliff and Tobin, people have talked about their merits as an archer. I think any of them are better. And while I'm also generally just talking about Echo Shadows of Valentia, I think this is true of Gaiden as well. I just made Tobin archer in my Gaiden playthrough and basically just ignored Python entirely. So, yeah, generally it's easy to forget to like recruit him. Then if you do, he can't hit the broadside of a barn. Now, granted, a lot of characters and Echoes have trouble with hit rates, but especially Python outclassed one of your villagers turned into archer. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about Python. Next, we have 3 houses where I have just Edelgard on here, very polarizing character. So Edelgard joins in the prologue, and she has really shaky hit rates, whereas like Dimitri's hitting fine and like one-rounded if you use this combat art, like on Manity mode anyway. Even if some normal mode her hit rates are shaky, but that's obviously not why Edelgard's here. It feels kind of weird to mention this here in like 2025. But do we need more Edelgard discourse? Like everything that could be said about her, good or bad, defending her, critiquing her has already been said way better by many others, probably well more eloquently spoken than me. But I'll try to be brief. So, spoilers for like an over 5-year-old game. No one except the most like diehard Dimitri stans, Rhea simps, and Edelgard haters would deny that Edelgard had something of like a point interactions. Like the player firsthand witnesses like how Crest like torn families apart and like that sort of thing. The main problem I and many others have is that it's not really explained why she needed to start a war to fix this. She's set to become the next heir to Adressia, like the most major of the kingdoms. She would have control over that territory. You can implement policies in place there. Claude is kind of a neutral territory, and he's displayed like disdain for the church. So wait until he ascends leadership of the alliance. She could easily just reason with him. And then Dimitri, despite being like the Holy Kingdom of Farkas, he explicitly states in like at the end of like chapter 5 in Blue Lions route, like I believe that Ascaltair was wrong to like disown like Miklons and more Crest. But he also kind of raises like interesting points, like if we don't place values on Crest, no one will be able to use the heroes' relics, and then we could have trouble driving off bandits. She probably could have reasoned with him, and then even Rhea, who yes, she doesn't like outright say it's like, hey, don't do this with your kid. She doesn't. She never disapproves of it. She doesn't explicitly approve of it either, so she probably could have reasoned with Rhea, honestly, as tough as that is to believe. There's just on top of that, she works with those like underground mole people, those who slither on the dark to topple against Rhea, which really feels like that should have been inverted. Like Rhea in the Golden Deer route and like Blue Lions route, she like steps down, and think it's like Violet who steps up. She kind of recognized some of the error of her ways. Like those who slither in the dark were definitely a bigger priority, and side with them to take down Rhea really seems like backwards priority. And just like the top of that, like in her own route, like she criticizes Rhea for like lying about history, which fair, that is valid. Like only the most diehard of Rhea simps would deny that she did. Well, only the most diehard of like Rhea simps would say Rhea did absolutely nothing wrong. So that's valid. But then in her own route, when like those who slither in the dark like launched that ballista thing, she says, "Oh, that was the work of the church," because she doesn't want to lose trust. So in her own route, she's already lying about history from the get-go. So it's like, yeah, starts a war where I think she had like more peaceful options, just could have like negotiated with. Lies about history in her own route. Yeah, that's what I have to say about Edelgard. And even just playing her own route, she's kind of sympathetic. Like you kind of get the impression she wants to unite the world through conquest, kind of like a Walhart from Awakening. But again, it doesn't go into a good job of why she needs to go into like bloodshed and conquering rather than just like reasoning. Yeah, I could go into more detail, start like a 3 to 5 hour long rant video about Edelgard, but does the internet really need any more of those? And last and kind of least in a way, from Engage, I went with Alfred, who personality, it's whatever. But if you saw my Engage tier list where I put Alfred at the bottom, I probably didn't need to. He's probably not that bad, but main problem with Alfred is just in a game where like any unit can be good, Alfred is just painfully mediocre. Like his stats will always be up 1 or 2 points short of doing things. He's got terrible speed. He like never doubles anything. Almost often like getting doubled himself. And this is my first playthrough, but I wasn't playing on Madden mode. I was playing on hard mode. I imagine it's like even worse than like Madden mode. Just overall, like after my first playthrough in hard, it's like wow, there are other characters I wanted to try. Like wanted to use different characters to varying degrees of success. There are other characters I did use. I want to try maybe a different build, different class, different emblem ring. After I first played through in hard using Alfred, it's like, wow, I never want to use him again. And that's my takes. As always, thank you so much for watching. Questions, comments, rude or snide remarks, let me know below. As always, I will see you guys next time. This is Enigmatic Mr. L, signing out.